Warning: contains adult content including harsh language, violence, and sexual themes, and may not be suitable for people under age 17.
Damien! Stop! Stop! Damien released him and shook his head quickly. He looked at the wound. It was bleeding freely, but it wasn't at all deep.
Sorry,
he said, wiping his mouth.
Got carried away.
You think so? Said Nathaniel sarcastically. He was scarlet in the face, his heart thumping so loudly in his chest he was afraid Damien would be able to hear it.
You taste good,
he said, unabashed.
Like sweet. Sweet like candy. Starburst, to be specific.
Nathaniel was bemused.
Starburst?
He said disbelievingly. No way.
Well, they say that human flesh is supposed to taste like pomegranate, so wouldn't it make sense for blood to be sweet?
Said Damien with a frisky smile. Blood tastes like copper, said Nathaniel pointedly. Said Damien, and he came very close to his face, gently touching his cheek.
Then maybe it's just you who's sweet.
Nathaniel didn't know how to react. He felt like his heart was going to burst out of his chest.
Maybe I should go, he muttered. No, please stay,
said Damien, his tone much more sincere.
I really want you to stay. Please?
I don't...
Stay the night.
What?
Stay with me, tonight.
Nathaniel stared at Damien, who was so close he could smell his breath. It smelled like cinnamon. He didn't know why, but he didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay just like Damien was asking him to. However, he was extremely nervous. I will stay, he said quietly, but on one condition.
Anything,
breathed Damien. Get me a Band-Aid. Damien stared at him for a moment, and then burst out laughing.
See, this is why I can't stay mad at you,
he cried, jumping up from the sofa.
I've never laughed this much in my life.
He walked away into the bathroom, and Nathaniel sat up, touching the bite. There was quite a bit of blood. Damien returned shortly with a cloth, Bactine, and an adhesive bandage. He started gently cleaning the wound on Nathaniel's neck, who winced slightly. After the bandage was applied, Damien patted Nathaniel's head firmly.
There you go, lad. All better.
Thanks, he said, attempting to button his shirt up, but Damien smacked his hand away and released the fourth button. Hey, quit it! He tried again, and then Damien went after the fifth button. I said stop it! Nathaniel was getting frustrated. In a flash, Damien had undone the rest of the buttons.
Nuh-uh,
he said, sticking out his tongue. He tried once more to button up his shirt, but Damien wouldn't let him. What is up with you? He asked, furrowing his brow.
I feel playful,
he said, almost seductively. Just then, Nathaniel's stomach gave a mighty growl.
And you're feeling hungry, apparently.
Just a little, he admitted.
What do you like to eat, regular tofu or extra bland tofu?
Said Damien with a snigger. Nathaniel smacked his chest, and Damien laughed again, walking into the kitchen.
Stay there,
he called. Don't sneak any meat into it, said Nathaniel, but oddly, he trusted Damien more than that. All the same, he wondered what he was going to make for him. He remembered the story he was telling about Jeffrey Dahmer, and suddenly became very afraid. Maybe he didn't trust him that much. He ran into the kitchen, skidding on the linoleum. Damien turned around quickly, looking miffed.
I told you to stay,
he said angrily. Are you going to drug me? Nathaniel asked quickly. Damien actually looked insulted.
No,
he said in a hurt voice.
In fact, I wanted it to be a surprise. But here you go, Mr. Paranoid. Take a look.
Nathaniel stepped forward and looked into a pot boiling on the stove. It looked like some sort of vegetable stew. It smelled quite good. What is it? He asked.
Gumbo herbs,
Damien replied angrily, arms crossed.
Vegetable gumbo.
Oh, wow, said Nathaniel, feeling guilty. I'm sorry.
It's all right, I guess,
said Damien with a deep sigh.
You had reason to suspect me of such antics, but maybe after tonight you'll trust me a little more.
Do you still hate me? Asked Nathaniel.
I dunno,
he replied, shrugging.
Right now, I don't care. Now get out of my kitchen. Cooking is my zen time.
Nathaniel smiled and went back into the living room. He spotted a bookshelf in a far corner of the living room he hadn't noticed before. It blended in so well with the dark wall. He looked at the titles. They were just the sort of books that suited Damien. The Necronomicon, the Book of Lucifer, The Master and Margarita, Melmoth the Wanderer, Rosemary's Baby, Butcher Bird, Deathbird stories, and other menacing works, including many from Edgar Allan Poe. There were also numerous books entirely in Latin. Nathaniel was fluent in Latin, of course, but how was Damien? It wasn't even taught in schools anymore.
Nathaniel!
Damien barked from the kitchen.
Come get your damn food!
Nathaniel rolled his eyes at how rude he sounded. After they both had bowls of the gumbo, Damien having put beef in his, they returned to the living room. Damien took the remote and smiled evilly at Nathaniel.
Do you like scary movies?
I've never seen one before, he replied, unsure. Damien let out a sort of deep, evil chuckle.
Ooh, I'm going to enjoy this,
he purred. He turned on a movie called Audition, which was in Japanese, but with English subtitles. Nathaniel personally couldn't see how it was a horror movie. It seemed like a romantic comedy to him. However, about an hour and a half into the movie, things got weird. They had finished their dinner quite some time before it happened. Damien snickered to himself for no apparent reason. Nathaniel ignored it, but then his eyes widened as he continued to watch the movie. The female lead was sticking pins into her boyfriend's body, and then cut off his feet with piano wire. It was also going back and forth between gruesome flashbacks. Nathaniel felt sick. He grabbed Damien's arm and buried his face into his sleeve. Damien laughed, resisting the urge to force Nathaniel to watch.
Too much for you?
He asked teasingly. Nathaniel nodded, not lifting his head.
Well then, never watch Strange Circus.
I'll take your word for it, said Nathaniel, voice muffled slightly. Are the bad parts over?
Nope,
said Damien.
Goes all the way to the end.
When Nathaniel whimpered, Damien sighed and turned the movie off.
Note to self, don't jump right into the bad stuff with a virgin.
Nathaniel lifted his head, blushing. Phrasing, he thought.
Well, no point in torturing you any longer. Let's go to bed.
All right, said Nathaniel, and he picked up both his and Damien's dishes.
What are you doing?
He asked. I'm going to wash these out, Nathaniel replied.
What? No, just throw them in the sink.
I'm the guest, and I have used your dishes. I am going to clean them.
Will you just be bad for once? Throw them on the floor. I don't give a shit.
I'm going to wash them. With that, Nathaniel went into the kitchen and washed the bowls out. Damien sat on the couch, fuming with annoyance. When Nathaniel returned, Damien stood up.
All right, let's go to my room,
he said calmly. Nathaniel blinked, and then looked at the couch. I'll just sleep down here on the couch, he said nervously.
No,
said Damien gently, stepping closer.
I'll be all alone up there.
And this is different from any other night, how? Said Nathaniel.
Well, whatever,
Damien yelled.
Fine, sleep alone on the cold couch. When you wake up with a crick in your neck, don't come crying to me.
Damien turned out the light, and then stomped up the stairs.
See you in the fucking morning!
Nathaniel frowned. He lay on the couch, only having a couch pillow and no blanket. He stared up at the dark ceiling, furrowing his brow so much he gave himself a headache. Why did Damien want him to sleep in his room so badly? He must feel very alone in this house all by himself, Nathaniel thought. Maybe that's why he begged me to sleep over. He's desperate for company. He felt a little sorry for Damien. Nathaniel never felt lonesome because he had his father and little sisters. Sure, he missed his mother, but he always spoke to her as if she was still there. Ariel and Esther had started doing it too. Nathaniel wished Damien would just be honest about feeling lonely. Just then he heard footsteps coming down the stairs. He quickly closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. He heard Damien approach him and suddenly felt a very soft blanket placed over him. Nathaniel tried hard not to move, for he knew Damien would feel a little embarrassed to be caught in the act of doing something so kind. After Nathaniel heard Damien go back upstairs, he opened his eyes and felt the blanket. It was made of velvet and, as far as he could tell, was black. He smiled to himself, closing his eyes and situating himself into a comfortable position. He's not as bad as he pretends to be, he thought contentedly. He just has trouble expressing himself the way he wants to. After that, he fell into an easy and pleasant sleep. Damien woke up around 10 o'clock, coming downstairs without a shirt on. A small ray of sunlight was shining through a gap in the black curtains, casting a small glow over Nathaniel's face. Damien froze, staring at his sleeping guest. His heart thumped loudly as he slowly approached him, kneeling at the side of the couch. Damien stared at Nathaniel's perfect boyish face, feeling butterflies in his stomach. For a long while now he'd had these strange feelings towards Nathaniel that he really didn't want to have. However, they grew stronger and stronger the more they were around each other. He hated himself for it, but he realized now that he couldn't help it. Damien slowly reached out a hand and caressed Nathaniel's cheek, hoping that he wouldn't wake up. Nathaniel was a heavy sleeper, so Damien was in no real danger. When he confirmed this, he gently stroked his golden hair, feeling its soft, wavy texture, almost as smooth as silk. Suddenly, Damien snapped back to reality and realized what he was doing. He quickly stood up and strode into the kitchen, starting to make breakfast. Nathaniel roused a few minutes later, smelling the food from the kitchen and feeling his stomach growl. He sat up and looked around, wondering what time it was, when Damien came back in. He stopped when he saw him awake, and then smiled devilishly.
"Breakfast,"
he said. He was holding a plate for himself that had eggs, sausage, and toast. Then he handed Nathaniel a raw potato. "What?" he said, confused.
"Vegan breakfast, potato."
Nathaniel stared at the tuber, and then at Damien. "Raw potatoes are toxic!" he exclaimed.
"Relax, I'm just kidding,"
said Damien with a laugh.
"Just wanted to see your facial expression. Stay here. I'll get your actual breakfast."
Nathaniel was a little annoyed, but all the same accepted his plate when Damien brought it to him. There were hash browns, toast with strawberry jelly, and 3 kinds of melon: watermelon, cantaloupe, and honeydew. "Wow, I'm impressed," he admitted.
"Yeah, well, you're bitchy about your diet. I was even afraid to butter the toast, so I gave you jelly."
Damien looked away from Nathaniel, and it seemed he was embarrassed at his act of thoughtfulness. "I really appreciate it, Damien," said Nathaniel with a smile. Damien sat next to him and turned on the television, watching some random top 10 most dangerous cats show. They ate their food in silence, and looking over, Nathaniel saw that Damien wasn't even watching the program. He was just staring at his food, picking at it, and looking incredibly depressed. "What's wrong?" he asked.
"Mind your own business,"
Damien replied softly. "Come on," Nathaniel urged. "You can tell me. Maybe I can help."
"Just forget it, okay?"
he snapped, and Nathaniel didn't say another word about it. "So," he started awkwardly, "I saw a lot of your books are in Latin. Are you fluent?"
"Yes,"
Damien replied, relieved at the change of subject.
"At my boarding school in England we were required to learn it. I'm rather fond of it, actually."
"Obsit in iuria verbis," said Nathaniel in a calm tone. Damien looked dumbfounded.
"How the bloody hell can you speak it?"
he asked, half impressed. "I learned it because I was interested in it," he replied slowly. In truth, angels and demons alike are all fluent in Latin, but only those born into heaven or hell, and not humans that were sent there after death. Damien gave a sly smirk.
"Post coitum omni animal triste est sive gallus et mulier,"
he purred, and Nathaniel blushed scarlet. "Why did you say that?" he asked in a high-pitched voice.
"Wanted to see a reaction,"
Damien replied. "I don't know if you realize this," said Nathaniel, still blushing, "but you're very perverted."
"Yup,"
said Damien simply. Silence fell between them again, and Damien went back to sulking. They finished eating, and he took Nathaniel's dish away to put it in the kitchen, despite Nathaniel's constant insisting that he take care of it. Nathaniel stared at the floor while Damien was in the other room, feeling like he must have done something wrong. He wondered if maybe this had to do with him not sleeping in Damien's room. How could that upset him so much? Damien came back into the room, seeing Nathaniel looking downtrodden. He frowned, walking up to him and putting a hand on his head. Nathaniel looked up at him and was surprised to see another one of Damien's rare, sincere expressions.
"Let's go get a coffee,"
he said softly. "Over by the pier again?" asked Nathaniel.
"No, I know of a Starbucks close by so we can actually sit down,"
said Damien.
"I think it'd be good to get out of the house."
"Damien," said Nathaniel, standing up, "are you okay?"
"I'm fine!"
Damien shouted.
"Stop asking!"
Nathaniel bowed his head, and they got fully dressed and left the house. The two of them didn't speak at all as Damien led him down into the city. They came up to the Starbucks that had both indoor and outdoor seating. Nathaniel sat at one of the tables outside while Damien went to get the coffee. When he came back, he set one down in front of Nathaniel.
"Soy milk,"
he said distractedly, sitting down. "Thanks," said Nathaniel awkwardly. He watched Damien sip his own coffee as he stared at the tabletop. He was getting more and more worried about him. He'd never seen him so depressed. Normally, he's angry or unusually playful. He suddenly slammed his hand on the table, making Damien jump and look up. "Tell me what's wrong!" he demanded. Damien considered him for a moment, and then he sighed.